What kind of person smashes a neighbor's dream in a fit of rage? The kind who thinks rules are weapons and community is a battlefield. My name is Lucas Grant, and I never thought I'd be the guy to spark a war in our sleepy suburban cul-de-sac. But when Karen Heller, our HOA president, took a shovel to my solar panels, she didn't just break glass. She shattered the illusion of neighborly peace. This is the story of how one woman's vendetta spiraled into chaos, and how I learned that justice sometimes comes with a twist sharper than any blade. It started with a letter, crisp and official, tucked in my mailbox on a humid July morning. The HOA board, led by Karen, had denied my request to install solar panels on my roof. Unsightly, they called them. A violation of community aesthetics. I read the letter twice, my hands shaking, not from anger, but from disbelief. I'd spent months researching, saving, dreaming of cutting my energy bills and doing my part for the planet. My wife, Mia, and I had pored over every HOA guideline, ensuring our plan complied. We'd even gotten approval from the city. But Karen, with her clipboard and her iron grip on the neighborhood, said no. I wasn't one to roll over. I'd grown up in a family that taught me to stand up for what's right, even when it's hard. So I appealed. I gathered signatures from neighbors who didn't mind the panels. Most thought they were cool, a step toward a greener future. I presented my case at the next HOA meeting, armed with facts about solar energy and photos of sleek, modern installations. Karen sat at the head of the table, her lips pursed, her eyes cold. She didn't argue. She just said, "The board's decision is final." That's when I knew this wasn't about rules. It was personal. I went ahead and installed the panels anyway. Call it defiance, call it principle. I wasn't going to let Karen's petty power trip stop me. The installation took 2 days, and by the end, my roof gleamed with possibility. Mia and I stood in the backyard, watching the panels soak up the sun, our 3-year-old daughter, Ellie, clapping like it was a magic trick. For a week, life felt perfect. Then Karen showed up. She didn't knock. She stood in my driveway, arms crossed, her blonde bob as sharp as her tone. "You're in violation, Lucas," she said, pointing at my roof. "Take them down, or there'll be consequences." I tried to stay calm, explaining the city's approval, the neighbors' support. She didn't listen. Her face reddened, and she stormed off, muttering about fines and lawyers. I thought that was the end of it. I was wrong. The next morning, I woke to the sound of shattering glass. I ran outside, barefoot, heart pounding, and saw her, Karen, standing in my backyard, a garden shovel in her hands. My solar panels, my pride, lay in ruins, their sleek surfaces cracked into a mosaic of destruction. She was screaming, something about ruining the neighborhood, but her words blurred into the roar in my ears. Mia grabbed my arm, pulling me back as I stepped toward Karen, my fists clenched. Ellie was crying inside, woken by the noise. 2 neighbors, Tom and Sarah, had come out of their houses, drawn by the commotion. They stood frozen, watching Karen's rage unfold. I didn't call the police. Not yet. I told Karen to leave, my voice low but shaking. She dropped the shovel, smirked, and walked away, her heels clicking on the pavement like a victory march. I stood there, staring at the wreckage, feeling like I'd been punched in the gut. Mia hugged me, whispering that we'd fix this, but I couldn't shake the image of Karen's smug face. She thought she'd won. She didn't know about the security camera I'd installed last year after a string of car break-ins. It had caught everything, every swing, every shard, every word. I spent the day cleaning up, picking glass out of the grass while Ellie played inside, oblivious to the war brewing. Mia kept checking on me, her eyes full of worry, but I told her I was fine. I wasn't. I was furious, not just at Karen, but at myself for underestimating her. I thought she was just a control freak, not a vandal. I uploaded the camera footage to my laptop, watching it over and over, the timestamp burning into my memory. 7:42 a.m., July 12th, 2025. Karen's face, clear as day, twisted with anger. I had her. But I didn't go to the police right away. I wanted to understand why. Why did Karen hate me so much? Why the panels? I started digging, talking to neighbors, piecing together her story. Karen had been HOA president for 5 years, ruling with an iron fist. She'd find people for unapproved mailboxes, sent nasty letters about unmowed lawns, even tried to ban kids' lemonade stands. But there was more. Tom, the guy next door, told me Karen's husband had left her last year, right after she lost her job at a real estate firm. She'd poured herself into the HOA, turning it into her kingdom. My solar panels, my defiance, had challenged her control. To her, it wasn't about aesthetics, it was about power. I decided to confront her, not with fists or shouts, but with the truth. I printed stills from the security footage and slipped them into her mailbox with a note. We need to talk. I didn't expect her to come. But that evening, she was at my door, her face pale, her usual confidence gone. "What do you want, Lucas?" she asked, her voice tight. I invited her in, sat her down, and played the footage. She didn't deny it. She just stared at the screen, her hands trembling. "You don't understand," she whispered. "You don't know what it's like to lose everything." That was the twist I didn't see coming. Karen wasn't just a villain. She was broken. Her anger wasn't just about me. It was about a life unraveling. For a moment, I felt pity. But then I remembered Ellie's tears, the shattered glass, the months of work and savings destroyed. Pity didn't erase consequences. I told her I was going to the police unless she made it right. She begged me not to, promised to pay for the damage, but I wasn't sure I could trust her. I gave her one day to decide. The next morning, Karen didn't call or show up. Instead, I got another letter from the HOA, this one threatening legal action if I didn't remove the unauthorized panels within 48 hours. The audacity hit me like a slap. She hadn't just ignored my ultimatum. She'd doubled down. I sat at the kitchen table, the letter crumpled in my hand, while Mia made coffee, her silence louder than any words. Ellie was at preschool, and the house felt too quiet, like it was holding its breath for what came next. I knew I couldn't let this go. Karen had made her choice, and now I had to make mine. I called Tom and Sarah, the neighbors who'd seen Karen's rampage. They were hesitant at first, worried about getting involved, but when I showed them the footage, their reluctance faded. Tom, a quiet guy who usually kept to himself, clenched his jaw and said, "She's gone too far." Sarah nodded, her eyes fierce. "We're with you, Lucas." Their support felt like a lifeline, a reminder that I wasn't alone in this fight. I uploaded the footage to a USB drive and drove to the police station, my heart pounding with every mile. The officer who took my statement was a no-nonsense woman named Detective Reyes. She watched the video in silence, her expression unreadable, then asked, "You sure you want to press charges? This could escalate." I nodded, thinking of Ellie, of Mia, of the principal at stake. "She destroyed my property," I said. "She doesn't get to walk away." Reyes jotted down notes, then told me they'd bring Karen in for questioning. As I left the station, I felt a strange mix of relief and dread. Justice was moving, but at what cost? Back home, word spread fast. By evening, neighbors were texting, whispering about Karen's meltdown. Some were shocked. Others weren't surprised. "She's been terrorizing us for years," one woman texted in the neighborhood group chat. About time someone stood up to her. But not everyone agreed. A few of Karen's loyalists, mostly older residents who liked her strict rules, started spreading rumors that I'd provoked her, that the solar panels were an eyesore. The cul-de-sac was splitting, and I was at the center of the divide. That night, Mia and I sat on the couch, Ellie asleep upstairs. "What if this gets worse?" Mia asked, her voice soft but heavy. I squeezed her hand, promising we'd get through it, but I wasn't sure I believed it. The next day, Karen was questioned by the police. She didn't confess, not outright, but the footage was damning. They charged her with vandalism and destruction of property. I thought that would be the end, that she'd back down, but Karen wasn't done fighting. She called an emergency HOA meeting, rallying her supporters. I went, not because I wanted to, but because I needed to see what she was planning. The community center was packed, the air thick with tension. Karen stood at the podium, her voice steady, but her eyes wild. She didn't mention the charges or the footage. Instead, she painted me as the villain, a reckless outsider who'd ignored the rules and threatened the neighborhood's values. A few people clapped. Others shifted uncomfortably. I stood up, my hands shaking, and said, "You broke my property, Karen. There's video proof. This isn't about rules. It's about you losing control." The room erupted. Some shouted in my defense. Others called me a liar. Karen's face went white, then red, and she slammed her gavel down, ending the meeting. As people filed out, I saw the cracks in her armor. Her allies were wavering, whispering among themselves. But I also saw something else, a flicker of desperation in her eyes. She wasn't just fighting me. She was fighting to hold on to whatever power she had left. The next morning, I found a new letter in my mailbox, handwritten this time. It was from Karen, and it wasn't what I expected. "I'm sorry," it began. "I lost myself. I'll pay for the damage. Please drop the charges." I read it 3 times, searching for a trick, but it felt genuine. Mia read it too, her eyes softening. "Maybe she's scared," she said. "Maybe she's finally seeing what she did." I wasn't so sure. Karen had manipulated people before. Could this be another ploy? I didn't respond. Not yet. I needed time to think. But time wasn't on my side. That afternoon, Tom called me, his voice urgent. "Karen's been talking to a lawyer," he said. "She's claiming you harassed her, that the footage is doctored." My stomach dropped. I hadn't expected her to fight this dirty. I called Detective Reyes, who confirmed Karen had filed a counter-complaint, alleging I'd provoked her into breaking the panels. It was a weak defense, but it muddied the waters. The neighborhood was buzzing now, split between those who believed me and those who saw Karen as a victim of my rebellion. I started losing sleep, replaying every moment, questioning if I'd pushed too hard. Mia stayed strong, reminding me why we'd fought in the first place. "This isn't just about us," she said. "It's about doing what's right." She was right, but the weight of it was crushing. I met with a lawyer, a friend of Tom's, who reviewed the footage and said my case was solid. "She's grasping at straws," he said. "But be ready. She's not going down quietly." He was right. Karen's next move was a gut punch. She went public. Not to the police, not to the HOA, but to a local news blog. The headline screamed, "HOA president targeted by rogue neighbor." The article twisted everything, painting Karen as a dedicated community leader harassed by a selfish homeowner who'd installed illegal solar panels. My name wasn't mentioned, but everyone knew it was me. Comments poured in, some calling for my head, others questioning Karen's story. The cul-de-sac was a powder keg now, and I was holding the match. I didn't know how to fight a PR war. I wasn't a public speaker or a social media guru. I was just a guy who wanted clean energy and a safe home for my family. But I couldn't let her narrative win. I posted the security footage online, not to the blog, but to the neighborhood group chat with a simple message. This is the truth. The video spread like wildfire. Neighbors who'd stayed silent started speaking up, sharing their own stories of Karen's bullying. The tide was turning, but I knew it wasn't over. Karen was too stubborn, too desperate to let go without a fight. The fallout from the video was immediate and chaotic. My phone buzzed nonstop with messages, some supportive, others vicious. One neighbor, an older woman named Margaret, stopped by with cookies and a whispered, "Thank you for standing up to her." But others glared at me when I mowed the lawn, their loyalty to Karen unshaken. The cul-de-sac felt like a war zone, every glance loaded with judgment. Mia tried to keep things normal for Ellie, but even she sensed the tension, asking why the mean lady was mad at us. I didn't know how to explain it to a 3-year-old. Karen didn't stop. She doubled down, organizing a petition to have me fined for defamation and disrupting community harmony. It was absurd, but it gained traction. A dozen signatures appeared overnight, mostly from her inner circle. I couldn't believe it. People were siding with a woman who'd smashed my property, caught on camera, over a guy trying to protect his family. My lawyer told me to stay calm, to let the legal process play out, but calm was the last thing I felt. I was angry, tired, and starting to wonder if I'd made a mistake. Then came the twist that broke my heart. Sarah, one of the neighbors who'd backed me, came over one evening, her face pale. "Lucas, there's something you need to know," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. She told me Karen had been spreading a rumor that I'd threatened her physically the day she broke the panels. It was a lie, but Sarah said some neighbors believed it, especially after Karen showed them a bruise on her arm, claiming I'd grabbed her. I was stunned. I hadn't touched her, hadn't even been close enough to, but the accusation was out there, poisoning the air. Mia was furious, pacing the living room, ready to storm Karen's house and set the record straight. I held her back, knowing that's what Karen wanted, a reaction to make me look unhinged. Instead, I called Detective Reyes and told her about the rumor. She was skeptical, but promised to look into it. "If she's lying, it'll come out," Reyes said. "But you need to watch her back." I didn't need the warning. I felt like I was in a trap. Every move scrutinized, every word twisted. The next HOA meeting was a battlefield. Karen had rallied her supporters, and the room was packed with faces I barely recognized. She stood at the front, her voice steady, but her hands shaking as she read a prepared statement. She accused me of harassment, of faking the footage, of turning the neighborhood against her. She even cried, tears streaking her mascara, and I saw some people soften, their doubts shifting to me. I stood up, my voice steady despite the knot in my chest. "I have proof," I said, holding up a USB drive. "The footage is real, and so is the damage. Karen, you can't lie your way out of this." The room went silent, then erupted again. A man I didn't know shouted that I was a troublemaker. Margaret, the cookie lady, yelled back, calling Karen a bully. The meeting dissolved into chaos, and Karen fled, her allies trailing her like a defeated army. I felt no victory, only exhaustion. But something shifted that night. More neighbors reached out, sharing stories of Karen's overreach, fines for minor infractions, threats over petty disputes. The petition against me stalled, and Karen's grip on the HOA started to slip. But she wasn't done. The next day, I got a call from my lawyer. Karen had filed a civil lawsuit against me, claiming emotional distress and defamation. It was a desperate move, but it scared me. Legal battles were expensive, and we weren't rich. Mia and I sat down with our savings, calculating what we could afford. "We can't let her win," Mia said, her eyes fierce. I nodded, but inside I was crumbling. I wanted to do the right thing, but now my family was paying the price. I started documenting everything. Every letter, every email, every conversation. I met with neighbors, building a case, gathering witnesses. Tom and Sarah agreed to testify about what they'd seen that morning. Others came forward with their own complaints about Karen, from unfair fines to intimidation. It was a slow, grueling process, but gave me purpose. I wasn't just fighting for my solar panels anymore. I was fighting for everyone she'd hurt. Then came another blow. The local news blog ran a follow-up story, this time mentioning the footage I'd posted. They called it a neighborhood feud gone viral, framing it as petty drama rather than a clear case of vandalism. The comments section exploded, with strangers weighing in, some calling me a hero, others a villain. I hated the attention, the way it reduced our lives to clickbait. But it had an effect. Karen's lawsuit started losing steam as public opinion turned. People were sharing the video, dissecting her lies, demanding accountability. I thought that was the turning point, but Karen had one last card to play. She showed up at my house, unannounced, on a rainy Thursday evening. Ellie was asleep, and Mia was out with friends, so it was just me and her on the porch. She looked different, smaller, almost fragile, her hair limp from the rain. "I'll drop the lawsuit," she said, her voice low. "I'll pay for the panels. Just drop the charges." I stared at her, searching for the catch. "Why now?" I asked. She didn't answer, just handed me a check, $10,000, enough to cover the damage. I didn't take it. I told her I'd think about it, but deep down, I knew I couldn't trust her. Not yet. The check sat on my kitchen counter for 2 days, a silent challenge. Mia wanted to tear it up, call it blood money, but I wasn't so sure. Accepting it felt like letting Karen off too easy, but rejecting it meant dragging this fight out longer, draining our savings, our energy. I called my lawyer, who advised caution. She's trying to buy her way out, he said. If you take it, she could claim you settled. I decided to hold off, but the weight of that decision gnawed at me. Every choice felt like a trap. The neighborhood was fracturing more each day. Karen's allies were quieter now, but they still left passive-aggressive notes in the group chat, accusing me of tearing the community apart. Others rallied behind me, organizing a petition to remove Karen as HOA president. It gained traction fast, 30 signatures in a week, more than her petition against me. I didn't sign it. I didn't want revenge. I wanted justice. But I couldn't deny the satisfaction of seeing her empire crumble. Detective Reyes called with an update. Karen's countercomplaint was falling apart. The bruise on her arm had no evidence linking it to me, and the security footage was airtight. The vandalism charges were moving forward, and Karen was facing a court date. I should have felt relieved, but instead, I felt hollow. This wasn't how I'd imagined my life. Caught in a legal battle, my neighbors picking sides, my daughter asking why people were so mad. I started questioning if I'd pushed too hard, if I could have found another way. Then came the night that changed everything. I was working late in the garage, sorting through the last of the broken panel pieces, when I heard a knock. It was Sarah, her face streaked with tears. "Lucas, you need to see this," she said, holding out her phone. It was an email from Karen, sent to the entire HOA board, admitting she'd broken my panels. She called it a moment of weakness, blamed stress, and begged for forgiveness. She was stepping down as president, effective immediately. The email ended with a plea, "Don't let this destroy our community." I read it twice, stunned. Sarah was sobbing now, not out of pity for Karen, but from the weight of it all. "She sent this to everyone," she said. "It's over." But it didn't feel over. It felt like the ground had shifted, leaving me unsteady. I showed Mia the email when she got home, and we sat in silence, processing. "She's trying to save face," Mia said finally. "But she's done." I nodded, but I couldn't shake the feeling that there was more to come. The next morning, the neighborhood was buzzing again, this time with shock. Karen's email had gone viral in a group chat, with replies ranging from outrage to sympathy. Some called for her to move out. Others urged compassion, citing her personal struggles. I stayed out of it, but the pressure was mounting. The police called to confirm Karen's court date, and my lawyer said the case was a slam dunk. But winning didn't feel like winning anymore. It felt like surviving. I decided to confront Karen one last time, not to gloat, but to understand. I went to her house, a tidy ranch-style home with perfect landscaping, and knocked. She answered, looking like she hadn't slept in days. "What do you want, Lucas?" she asked, her voice flat. I told her about the email, asked why she'd sent it. She sighed, leaning against the doorframe. "I couldn't keep lying," she said. "Not to them, not to myself." She admitted she'd been unraveling since her divorce, using the HOA to feel in control. Breaking my panels was her breaking point. For the first time, I saw her not as a villain, but as a person, flawed, hurting, human. I didn't forgive her, not fully, but I understood. I told her I'd consider dropping the charges if she followed through on her promise to pay for the damage. She nodded, tears in her eyes, and I left, feeling lighter but still burdened. The fight wasn't over, but the fire in it was fading. The court date loomed, and I spent the days leading up to it preparing with my lawyer. Neighbors kept reaching out, some offering support, others begging me to let it go. Margaret, the cookie lady, stopped by again, this time with a casserole and a story about how Karen had once helped her after a flood. "She's not all bad," Margaret said. "Just lost." I didn't know what to make of it. I wanted justice, but I didn't want to destroy her. The day before the hearing, Karen sent another check, this one certified, with a letter promising to cover all repair costs and resign from the HOA permanently. I showed it to Mia, who finally agreed we should accept it. "Not for her," she said, "but for us. To move on." I deposited the check, feeling a strange mix of relief and guilt. The panels could be replaced, but the trust in our neighborhood was harder to rebuild. When the hearing came, I went not to testify, but to watch. Karen pleaded guilty, her voice steady but soft. The judge sentenced her to community service and restitution, already covered by her check. She didn't look at me as she left the courtroom, but I saw the weight on her shoulders. The neighborhood was there too, a mix of supporters and critics, their faces a mirror of the divide we'd all lived through. The weeks after the hearing were quiet, almost too quiet. Karen kept a low profile, her house dark most evenings, her car rarely in the driveway. The HOA elected a new president, a soft-spoken retiree named Carl who promised transparency and fairness. The petition to remove Karen had become moot, but the scars of the fight lingered. Neighbors were cautious, conversations stilted. I felt it too, a lingering unease, like we were all waiting for the next explosion. I used Karen's check to replace the solar panels, and the installation was smoother this time. No letters or threats from the HOA. Ellie clapped again when they went up, her innocence a reminder of why I'd fought. But every time I looked at the panels, I saw Karen's face, not in anger, but in defeat. I didn't hate her anymore, but I couldn't forget either. Mia noticed my distraction, urging me to let it go. "We won," she said. "Focus on us." I tried, but the victory felt hollow. Then came the community barbecue, an annual event I'd always skipped. This year, Carl insisted I come, saying it was a chance to heal. I was skeptical, but went for Ellie's sake. She loved the bounce house. The park was crowded, kids running wild, neighbors chatting over burgers. I kept my distance, sticking with Mia and Ellie, but I felt eyes on me. Some nodded in approval, others turned away. Karen was there, standing alone by the drink table, her usual confidence gone. I didn't approach her, but Ellie did, tugging at her sleeve to offer a dandelion. Karen smiled, a real smile, and I saw a flicker of the person she might have been before all this. That moment stayed with me. I started thinking about what Margaret had said, about Karen not being all bad. I didn't want to forgive her, not exactly, but I wanted to understand what healing looked like. I started small, joining the group chat again, sharing tips on solar energy, offering to help neighbors with their own green projects. The response was slow but warm. People wanted to move forward, to rebuild what Karen's reign had broken. One evening, Tom invited me to a meeting with a few neighbors who wanted to reform the HOA. They drafted new bylaws, ones that prioritize fairness over control. I wasn't sure I wanted to get involved, but Mia encouraged me. "You started this," she said. "You can help finish it." So I went, and for the first time in months, I felt like I was part of something bigger than my own fight. We talked about community gardens, solar incentives, ways to make the neighborhood a place where people felt heard, not silenced. Karen didn't show up to the meeting, but I heard she'd started volunteering at a local shelter, part of her community service. Some neighbors said it was an act, but others said she was changing slowly. I didn't know what to believe, but I hoped it was true, not for her sake, but for the neighborhood's. Hate was a heavy thing to carry, and I was tired of it. The new panels were working better than the old ones, cutting our energy bill in half. Ellie started calling them sun catchers, and I didn't correct her. Every time I saw them gleam, I felt a spark of pride, not just for the panels, but for what they represented, standing up, pushing forward, believing in something better. Mia and I started hosting game nights, inviting neighbors over, rebuilding the bonds Karen's actions had strained. It wasn't perfect, but it was a start. One night, as I tucked Ellie into bed, she asked, "Is the mean lady still mad?" I hesitated, then said, "I think she's trying to be better." Ellie nodded, satisfied, and I realized that was the lesson I wanted her to carry. Not anger, not revenge, but the hope that people could change. I kissed her forehead, turned off the light, and went to the window, looking out at the cul-de-sac. The streetlights glowed, the houses quiet, and for the first time in months, I felt like we were home. The fight with Karen had cost us money, time, trust, but it had given us something too. It showed me the power of standing up, the strength of community, the messiness of justice. I didn't regret it, not a single moment. The panels were more than glass and silicon. They were a symbol of what we could build when we refused to back down. And as I looked at the stars above, I knew we'd keep building one day, one neighbor, one dream at a time. The stars were bright that night, a reminder that the world kept turning, no matter how small our cul-de-sac felt in the grand scheme. I stood by the window, replaying the past months in my mind, the anger, the fear, the fight, but also the moments of hope, like Ellie's dandelion, a tiny gesture that cracked open something human in Karen. The neighborhood was healing, slowly, like a bruise fading. People were talking again, not just about the drama, but about the future, solar panels, community projects, a new way forward. It wasn't perfect, but it was progress. The HOA meetings under Carl's leadership were different. No gavel slammed in anger, no veiled threats. We discussed practical things, budget transparency, maintenance schedules, even a community garden. I spoke up sometimes, sharing what I'd learned about solar incentives, and people listened. Not everyone loved me. Some still saw me as the guy who'd stirred up trouble. But others, like Margaret and Tom, saw what I'd been fighting for, a neighborhood where rules serve people, not power trips. I started to feel like I belonged again, not just to the cul-de-sac, but to the idea of what it could be. Karen's absence was noticeable. She kept her word, staying out of HOA business, volunteering at the shelter. I heard she was good at it, organizing supplies, helping families rebuild after their own disasters. I didn't know if it was genuine or just her sentence, but I hoped she was finding something to hold on to, something that wasn't control. I didn't see her much, just glimpses of her car or her shadow in the window. She was a ghost now, not of malice, but of a past we were all trying to move beyond. Mia and I kept hosting game nights, and they grew. First Tom and Sarah, then Margaret, then others I barely knew. Ellie loved the chaos, kids running through the house, adults laughing over cards. It felt like the opposite of Karen's HOA meetings, where every word was a landmine. Here, people shared stories, not accusations. One night, Sarah brought up the idea of solar co-op, pooling resources for more panels across the neighborhood. I offered to help with the paperwork, and the room buzzed with excitement. It wasn't just about saving money. It was about building something together. Ellie started preschool, and we'd walk her there each morning, the new panels gleaming on our roof. She'd point at them, calling them sun catchers, and I'd smile, remembering why I'd fought so hard. The energy bills were lower now, the savings real, but the real win was the feeling of standing firm. I'd look at Mia, her hand in mine, and know we'd done the right thing, not just for us, but for Ellie, for the neighbors who'd stood with us, for the idea that one person could make a difference. The group chat was lively now, not with feuds, but with plans, barbecue schedules, garden designs, even a kids' soccer league. I didn't jump into every thread, but I read them, smiling at the shift. People were dreaming again, not just surviving. Carl stopped by one day with a draft of the new bylaws, asking for my input. I was hesitant, still raw from the fight, but I read them. They were fair, clear, focused on community over control. I made a few suggestions, and Carl listened, nodding like I had something worth saying. It felt good. Karen's court-mandated service ended, and I heard she kept volunteering. Someone saw her at the shelter, sorting clothes, talking to people like she wasn't the HOA queen anymore. I didn't know what to make of it. Part of me wanted to believe she was changing. Part of me remembered the shovel, the glass, the lies. I didn't hate her, not anymore, but trust was a long way off. Mia said it best. Let her live her life. We've got ours. The panels kept working, soaking up the sun, powering our home. I checked the meters sometimes, watching the numbers tick down, a quiet victory. But the real victory was the cul-de-sac coming alive again. Neighbors waved when I mowed the lawn, stopped to chat about more than just the weather. We weren't a perfect community. There were still grudges, still whispers, but we were trying. And that was enough. One evening, as I tucked Ellie in, She asked about the sun catchers again. Do they make the world better? She said, her eyes wide. I thought about it, about the fight, the cost, the hope. Yeah, I said, they do. And so do we. She smiled, drifting off, and I stood there, watching her breathe, knowing this was why I'd fought. Not just for the panels, but for her, for a world where she could grow up believing in what's right. I stepped outside, the air cool, the stars sharp above the cul-de-sac. The houses were lit, warm, alive. The fight with Karen had been a storm, but we'd come through it. We'd lost some things, trust, time, innocence, but we'd gained others. A neighborhood that dared to dream. A family that stood stronger. A story that wasn't about breaking, but about building. And as I looked at the panels, glinting under the moonlight, I knew we'd keep building, one day, one choice, one neighbor at a time. The cul-de-sac settled into a new rhythm, one that felt less like a battlefield and more like a home. The panels on our roof weren't just ours anymore. They'd sparked something bigger. Sarah's solar co-op idea took root, with 5 neighbors signing up to explore installations. I helped with the research, digging into grants and tax breaks, feeling like I was paying forward what I'd learned. It wasn't just about energy, it was about proving we could do things differently, together. Carl's leadership kept the HOA grounded. Meetings were shorter, focused, with coffee and donuts instead of gavels and glares. The new bylaws passed unanimously, stripping out the petty rules Karen had wielded like a club. No more fines for unapproved mailboxes or slightly overgrown lawns. The focus shifted to practical stuff, fixing potholes, planting trees, funding a playground. I spoke up sometimes, not as a rebel, but as a neighbor, and people listened. It felt like we were rebuilding, not just the HOA, but the trust we'd lost. Karen stayed on the edges, a shadow in the neighborhood. She'd wave if we passed on the street. A small gesture, but I kept my distance. Not out of anger, but because some wounds take time. I heard she was still at the shelter, helping families displaced by a recent storm. Margaret said Karen had organized a donation drive. Her old intensity turned towards something good. I didn't know if it was redemption or just her sentence lingering, but I hoped it was the former. Not for her, but for the idea that people could change. Mia and I kept up the game nights, and they became a staple. Neighbors brought dishes, Margaret's casseroles, Tom's chili, and the house filled with laughter. Ellie would race around with other kids, her giggles a reminder of what we'd fought for. One night, Sarah proposed a community solar showcase, inviting everyone to see how the panels worked. We set it up in our backyard, the panels gleaming under string lights, and people asked questions, curious, not hostile. It felt like a victory lap, quiet but real. Ellie started drawing pictures of the sun catchers, colorful scribbles of our roof under a bright yellow sun. She'd show them to me, proud, and I'd hang them on the fridge, each one a reminder of why we'd stood our ground. Mia and I would sit on the porch after she was asleep, talking about the future, maybe more panels, maybe a garden, definitely more nights like these. The fight had taken a toll, but it had also shown us what we could do when we didn't back down. The group chat buzzed with plans, not gossip. A block party was coming up, and I volunteered to grill, something I'd never done before the fight. It felt right, flipping burgers while kids played and neighbors swapped stories. Even the ones who'd sided with Karen showed up, their edges softened. We didn't talk about the shovel or the footage, but we didn't need to. The cul-de-sac was moving on, not erasing the past, but building over it. One morning, as I walked Ellie to preschool, she pointed at the panels and asked, "Do they catch dreams too?" I laughed, kneeling to meet her eyes. "Maybe," I said. "They catch what we make of them." She nodded, like it made perfect sense, and ran off to play. I stood there, watching her go, the panels glinting behind me. They were more than glass and wire. They were a stand we'd taken, a future we'd fought for. That night, I checked the energy meter, the numbers ticking down, our savings growing. But the real savings were in the cul-de-sac, the conversations, the plans, the sense that we were more than just houses in a row. Karen's storm had passed, leaving us stronger, not broken. I looked out at the street, The lights warm, the stars bright, and knew we'd keep going. One panel, one neighbor, one day at a time.